That's right. I made a game mode where you have to fight 1,000 of me, maybe even more. Over the course of the last year and a half, this has been a side project that myself and a small team of developers have built from the ground up. Why? Because funny. The progression of how this whole thing eventually came to exist is rooted in ancient TF2 lore, spaghetti code, and memes. I find it all pretty interesting, so that's what this video is going to be about. And the best part is that you, yes you, the viewer, are able to play this. You can test your resilience and determination against the army of uncles. But before you do that, stick around for a little while and just listen to the story of how 1,000 uncles were born. Now, to get this out of the way before any of the TF2 old heads leave a comment though, this idea, putting a bunch of engineer bots on red team for players to fight, is not an original concept. It's not my idea. I did not come up with it. This game mode is actually called Engineer Fortress, and I first played it over 7 years ago on a community server called Nemu's. Nemu's was a relatively small but popular group of community servers that was, at first glance, a pretty standard TF2 server. They ran a bunch of vanilla maps and it had a pretty consistent player base of regulars, but Nemu's had a secret. If everyone in the server all joined spectator for just a few seconds, it would enable Engineer Fortress. It wasn't really a secret because everyone would always do this on the applicable maps, but it was something that was not exclusively focused on within Nemu's, which is crazy to me because, man, Engineer Fortress was so much fun. Every human player was forced to join blue team, while the red team was filled to the brim with engineer bots, all with instant respawn, infinite metal, and an unshakable will to keep building sentry guns over and over and over again while we desperately continued to destroy them. Blue team also had a short respawn timer and we were allowed to build teleporters in the spawn room, but otherwise, making it past this unyielding wall of buildings was something that required a unique combo of patience, positioning, and coordination that was unlike anything that I had ever played in TF2. It was awesome. Over the years, I occasionally joined Nemu specifically to play Engineer Fortress, which is weird to me because I don't know if you guys know this about me, but when it comes to TF2, and most video games for that matter, I am generally not a big fan of the modded gaming experience. Not to say that I don't love mods. I use mods in almost every game that I play for an extended period of time, but these are almost always exclusively quality of life or cosmetic mods that are client side and only serve to tweak the experience instead of vastly alter it from the developer's intentions. You could argue that a custom TF2 HUD is a quality of life mod, for example, but I've never really been a fan of mods that basically change the base game to be something else. No offense to the people who create or play these modded experiences, but historically, they have never really interested me. I am a vanilla plus boy through and through, with the exception of Engineer Fortress. This mode was always the asterisk when it came to TF2 mods for me. It was just so incredibly well designed and conceptualized that I have always regarded it as the best modded TF2 experience out there. I mean, it definitely helps that the base experience, more or less, is still like 95% TF2, if you think about it. I mean, it would be technically possible for this to still happen in a casual mode game. Unlikely, nightmarish to imagine, but still possible. Anyway, eventually I learned that Nemu's was founded and maintained by a man who goes by the name Jill on Steam. Yes, that's right, that Jill. The Valve employee and TF2 developer Jill. Cool Beans Jill. Neato Jill, remember Neato? This guy's been one of the main TF2 developers since like 2012, but before he was hired at Valve to work on TF2, he founded and was the main administrator of Nemu's community server, which he started back in like 2008 or 2009. I mean, this all goes back like 15 years, so the history starts to get a little bit more blurry the further back you go, but even asking Nemu's veterans from way back then, Jill's role in maintaining the servers was more or less a mystery. All it could really be confidently said is that he created the servers and most likely paid the bills, but I couldn't find anyone who could confirm or deny to me that Jill was the one who created Engineer Fortress. I mean, if that were true, that would set a pretty hilarious precedent for this mode, right? Dude creates an awesome TF2 server with a mod where you fight a bunch of engineers, gets hired by Valve because of how awesome it is. But yeah, Engineer Fortress had remained my go-to TF2 mod of choice for many years. It's kind of like MVM, except blue team is the bots and the red team is also the bots, but we're attacking and they're defending, which is the opposite of MVM. You get it. It was good, clean, chaotic TF2 fun is the point. Until one day, Nemu's was gone. A little over 3 years ago, Nemu's went offline one day after an update and never came back. It's pretty standard for a TF2 server to go offline for a few hours after Valve pushes a patch so the server admin can update the server to the current version of the game, but Nemu's just didn't update. Nobody could connect to it anymore, and eventually the IP just wasn't accessible. So out of nowhere, Nemu's was just gone. Not even the admins knew why, and Jill was radio silent, as Valve employees tend to be. But considering Nemu's had been a project that he maintained since before he got hired at Valve, and had been maintaining long after he had started working on TF2 itself, Nemu's regulars found it odd that it would just go offline without any kind of announcement or explanation for its player base. But regardless of why this sudden shutdown happened, the most devastating thing to me was that Engineer Fortress was also gone. Nemu's was the only server that ran anything like it, so it had just become unplayable overnight. I was disappointed by this, but hey, you know, what can you do? Actually, yeah, what can I do? I started thinking to myself. I am a server owner now. I created Uncletopia in 2020. I have a place where Engineer Fortress could exist, and it makes sense, right? I am the TF2 engineer guide to a lot of people. It wouldn't be super out of the ordinary for, oh my god, what if all of the engineers are wearing the Uncle Dane cosmetics, and they'd all be named like variations of Uncle Dane, like Uncle Pain and Uncle Brain, like those memes that people always, oh my god, and holy shit, this is perfect. Okay, so you see how I got there. At this point, though, all I had was the idea. Recreate Engineer Fortress on Uncletopia, but with an Uncle Dane theme, and maybe some other tweaks to make it more challenging or interesting. But here's the problem. I don't know how to do that. I literally can't code. I can make a pretty dope MySpace page with some HTML, and I can organize my TF2 auto exec, but I don't know the first thing about making anything work using SourceMod, which is the primary framework in which most TF2 mods and plugins are created. So instantly, I asked for help. I put out a thing on Twitter asking if anyone who is fluent in SourceMod would be willing to help me develop a plugin. The same day, I got a message from Moonly Days, who has had a lot of experience making things with TF Connect and recently did a bunch of web dev stuff for the Fix TF2 movement. He fit the bill and was eager to help, so I sent him this exact pitch. This is a custom PvE game mode along the lines of man versus machine, but instead of playing exclusively defense, the human players are exclusively on offense. All maps will be either payload or attack defend. The bots are only assigned the engineer class. Both teams have instant respawn. The blue team will comprise of up to 24 human players, and the red team will comprise 24 engineer bots. Now, I don't know how I got it into my head that it could be 24 versus 24. It had been a while since I'd played Nemu's Engineer Fortress, and I think I had incorrectly remembered there being a lot more players and bots. Anyway, Moonly told me that he was totally down to make this idea happen, except for one small problem. TF2 is hard-coded to only allow 32 players max on one server, and TF bots count towards that number, so it would have to be 16 versus 16. In my head, this sounded like a lower number than I would have preferred, but those are the unchangeable limitations, so I had no choice but to go with it. But within just 3 hours of me sending this outline to Moonly, he had a super bare-bones functioning version of the idea. So I came up with this basic rule set, and we did our very first beta test on a private server that I invited people to join via Twitter. This first test was a shit show, as you might expect. A lot of stuff was broken, mostly due to things conflicting with existing Uncletopia configs like class limits, which forced a lot of the bots to pick other classes, but still retain the Uncle Dane cosmetics. Truly horrifying, but there was some wild shit like if you tried to join the red team, it would make blue team sentry guns hostile towards you, which is pretty funny. Dust Bowl didn't work properly. The infinite timer made it so that we were stuck in setup after stage 1. There was a lot of editing to be done on the plugin side as expected, but the main takeaway that I got from this first playtest was just that it was too easy. It was just really easy to win.
They're actually just unable to even get out. They're just stuck.
Yeah.
Blue team completely crushed the uncles. It was no contest. Any amount of focus fire from any one player made short work of any sentry gun, and then the uncles were just toast after that. So while Moonly worked on fixing all of the issues that we found within the plugin code, and Roto, the head admin of Uncletopia, removed all of the conflicting plugins that were breaking it before, like Vote Scramble, because yes, players figured out that you could scramble teams, and it completely ruined the entire game, as you could imagine. But I got to work on coming up with ideas for how to make it more difficult. First off, we set the bot difficulty to 3, which is the highest difficulty that the TF bots go to. During our playtest, they were set to difficulty 1, which made it so that they pretty much completely ignored spies and hardly ever did anything to defend themselves when attacked. This is something that I wanted to do from the very beginning, but when we forgot, oopsies. We also lowered the human team count from 16 to 12. I also wanted to do this because I could join Spectator now and watch the chaos from above. We also set the uncle's respawn time from being instant to being truly instant. instant. Now, what that means is normally when a server has quote-unquote instant respawn, it's actually more like a 3-second respawn, because after you die, you see this kill cam before you respawn again. True instant would be to respawn the moment your health reaches 0, which is what the uncles now do because they're bots. What are they going to do with a kill cam? So essentially, when you kill an uncle, you're not so much killing them as much as you're just teleporting them back into their spawn room. Meanwhile, though, because kill cams are funny, blue team still has the normal version of the instant respawn. But I also had to come up with the name for this whole thing. I mean, it didn't really feel right just calling it Engineer Fortress, since this was something that we were making specifically for Uncletopia. So here are the names that I considered before I landed on 1000 Uncles. Playtests after that all went significantly smoother, and the uncles were considerably harder to beat due to the myriad of buffs that we gave them over the course of the next few days of testing. In particular, buffing their wrenches to just be overall better at everything was a big factor in balancing them to be tougher to get past. Essentially, these changes made it so only one human player will not be able to out-damage a sentry gun being healed by an uncle. It will require either a demo man to place a bunch of stickies under it, or for 2 or more players to focus fire the gun to take it out, which encourages teamwork to progress. We also gave the uncles a base health of 185, which effectively makes them overhealed and makes them a bit tougher to kill even when they don't have their sentry guns. For spies in particular, the bots being set to difficulty 3 makes it so they have a 90% chance to notice your eternal reward stabs within 500 hammer units, which means that if you stab too many uncles within a big group of them, they will notice and they will attack you if they aren't preoccupied with their buildings.
They're all like glancing at me.
They're suspicious of you for sure.
This is so scary.
Uh-oh.
Oh, no! No! I touched them.
The spy touched me! We also gave them 2 new weapons, the Widowmaker and the Frontier Justice, which have a 33% chance to be equipped in addition to the stock shotgun, and a little fun Easter egg that we gave them a 1% chance to equip the Golden Pan. A strange thing about the TF bot coding, though, is that they absolutely refuse to switch to their secondary, and will only do so if their primary weapon runs out of ammo, which practically never happens. So unfortunately, pistol-slinging uncles is an extremely rare sight. But they also are just too stupid to be able to use the Wrangler or Short Circuit anyway, but I mean, could you imagine? That would be so horrible. I wish they could. We also got rid of the unusual effect for a playtest to see how much it would affect server performance, but it turns out it doesn't really help all that much. Apparently, unusual effects aren't even processed by the server anyway. It's all client-side, and it's not that impactful. And besides, I think the unusual effect actually helps with visibility on darker parts of certain maps, so we added it back for the next tests. Except Moonly said it to be Disco Beatdown instead of Miami Nights, which is not the right effect. It's Miami Nights. Apparently, they are very similarly named in the game files. We gave them all kill streak weapons because funny. We gave them a 100% chance to taunt after killing someone because funny. All talk is enabled so that the bots can hear us shit-talking them. Halloween is enabled because funny. And the timer is not only disabled, but now it counts up instead of down, so you can see how long you've been banging your head against the endless wall of uncles and ask yourself what you've been doing with your life. The playtests that we did with all of these changes were hands down the most illuminating and challenging trials for my closeted game developer brain. But the biggest takeaway from subjecting my subscribers to 1000 Uncles was that everyone was having a blast.
Get it. Oh my fucking god.
You're so fucked.
Holy fuck.
People were reacting strongly to the chaos at first, especially since I never explicitly told anyone what they were joining when I linked the server IP.
Looking at the server browser and I see the name of the server, I'm like, what the fuck is going on?
Then you join, it's just this.
Oh my god.
Yeah, last is something else.
No, I'm just looking at this through the grate. This is the worst thing I've ever seen.
But eventually, they began strategizing and coordinating with each other to try and beat it.
You gotta use the lock-in mode here.
I think the extra pipe and clip is better.
Honestly, the spice trap worked pretty well.
And roll it, I mean, you don't have to be
Like a longer range.
It was super addicting to watch these matches and see people fail and succeed in many creative ways that I had never even considered. I was super happy with the progress that this plugin had made in only a couple weeks. Except for this. This stupid error was, and has been, the final boss of making this plugin work. What this means when it pops up is that the edict limit has been reached and the server instantly crashes. What the hell is an edict? An edict? There are dicks in my game and apparently the limit has been reached. What are you talking about? An edict is basically an object, and TF2 can only handle so many objects at the same time. 2048 objects to be exact. If there are more than 2048 objects existing at the same time for even a split second in TF2, the game crashes and everybody is sad. So what counts as an object in TF2? Pretty much everything. I mean, map elements, players, weapons, hats, projectiles, doors opening, facial animations, anything that needs to be synced across the internet to everyone's computer, basically. That's an object in this context. Shunic has made a few videos about this. You should check those out if you're interested in the details, but for the purpose of 1000 Uncles functioning properly, the object limit is something that we needed to be constantly aware of and always planning around, because we have a pretty low ceiling compared to your average casual mode game. The map is usually the baseline. Most vanilla payload maps have a default of around 700 to 800 objects right off the bat. The smaller maps, like the 2-point attack defend ones, can get down to like 400, but the bigger ones, like the 3-stage payload maps, sit at around 1100, which is already half the object limit right off the bat with no players on it. Players typically count for around 10 objects each if they're wearing a full set of cosmetics, so a full server of 32 players where more than half of them are building a sentry, a dispenser, and teleporter each, that's another 400 or 500 objects. So by default, we're sitting at around 1500 objects if nothing happens. But when stuff does start happening, like people start firing stickies and rockets and blowing buildings up that split up into 5 pieces of metal each, people dropping their weapons on the ground, ragdolls flying everywhere, it's just object mania, and all it takes is for a demo man to detonate their 14 Scottish resistant sticky bombs underneath a cluster of 10 engineer nests to create a huge spike in objects for 1 second to crash the server. The main way that this usually happened, though, is at the end of the round when there were a bunch of uncles infinitely respawning while people killed them repeatedly with crits, which I ended up calling the Uncle Massacre.
My game's gonna crash!
The good news is these crashes due to the object limit only regularly happened on maps where the default object count is higher than average, such as on Gold Rush and Egypt, and luckily there was a pretty simple way to deal with this issue outright. We used a plugin that just quickly deletes excess objects if the amount of them in existence starts to creep too close to that 2048 limit. This doesn't outright prevent crashing, since a huge spike is something that can't really be mitigated in time, but it definitely helped a lot early on, if anything just to help with client-side lag. Disabling the Uncle Massacre also helped a lot, even though it was awesome. Sad to see that go. In particular, turning off the Halloween souls, though, did wonders for reducing the object count and helping with the overall visual clutter. They don't really have souls anyway. After we implemented these changes, we rarely saw crashes again. However, the battle with the object limit was far from over. At this point, though, the hard part was done. The plugin functioned as intended, and there were only a handful of specific changes we wanted to make from this point on, so we gave 1000 Uncles a permanent home on 4 public Uncletopia servers, 2 in North America and 2 in Europe, and just kind of let them exist. Because it was essentially a beta build of what I would call a feature-complete version, I refrained from ever officially telling people about it. Due to it mostly being on the Uncletopia server list, it still filled up from time to time, but mostly with people who didn't fully understand what it was or why it even existed, which honestly was endlessly entertaining for me to witness.
Has he not made a video about this already?
No, he hasn't.
So then what is it?
I don't know.
In a way, the mystery of why this even was a thing at all added to the humor of it for a lot of people, so I just kind of went with it.
Both me and my buddy Sam read this as the server name instead of the game mode. Like, there was no way in hell we would have expected there to be a game mode where you try to push the cart while being simultaneously beat on by hundreds of Uncle Danes. I don't know who came up with this or why they came up with this. I can only assume it was that bastard Uncle Dane himself.
But after it was released to the public to stumble upon randomly and try for themselves, we mostly just wrestled with bug fixing and smaller balance changes, mostly just to optimize the player experience. One big one ended up being the removal of a spectator, because while I personally love to spectate, the limited team size made it so anyone who joined after the blue team was full, which was something that was difficult to discern from the join page, were stuck in spectator mode until someone on blue team left. And I suppose it's unsurprising to see that people who join a server only to be denied the ability to play the game were not happy about it. So we just got rid of the ability for people to join spectator, and I was able to do it by just using an admin command. Eventually down the line, we figured out a way for spectator to exist harmoniously with the player count, but for now, it was removed. But the reason that I bring this up is that we had extra slots available people that previously belonged to the spectator team, and we had the opportunity to give either the humans or the uncles 4 extra team members. I think you can guess where those slots were allocated. So from that point on, the teams were officially 12 versus 20. Now, after this video, I imagine that some of you are going to go and play on one of the servers and see the madness for yourself, and I imagine that some of you are going to join and say, "Holy God, my frames! Where did they go?" Well, the unfortunate truth of this experiment is no matter how much I try and optimize the performance of this game mode, I cannot guarantee that your PC will allow you to comfortably play on a server with 1,500 entities on it at any given moment. So that's where this video sponsor comes in, redmagic's Titan 16 Pro gaming laptop. Now, I know it's a lot to suggest that you get an entire computer in order to play my dumb uncle mode, but that's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying that there's definitely still a bunch of you out there trying to play Team Fortress 2 casual mode vanilla 12v12 2-4 at an average of 40 frames per second. And I think it's time that you threw in the towel and admitted to yourself that you deserve more than that. So this thing is honestly pretty stacked as far as specs go. I'm not exactly Linus Tech Tips when it comes to PCs, but I can tell you that an Intel i9 CPU is really good. A GeForce RTX 4060 is really good. I mean, I don't even have a 40 series in my main gaming PC, but for me, the most important aspect is the 2K res display at 240 hertz, because a lot of people over the years have asked me, "Uncle Dane, how do I get better at Engineer? How do I get better at TF2?" And I've answered this in so many different ways in so many different videos, but I've always left out a big secret. Playing at a high frame rate on a display that can show you those frames. I'm not even kidding when I say that I saw a legitimate increase in my own skill when I upgraded to a 144 Hz monitor, and the redmagic Titan 16 Pro has one that goes up to 240. So again, this is not even a joke. I really do believe that if you see more frames, you can react to things happening way better in any game. That might not even be an opinion, that's probably just science. So I suggest no matter what you're deciding to do in TF2, whether you check out the chaos of 1,000 uncles or if you're just trying to casually frag out on Upward, that you consider upgrading your experience with the redmagic Titan 16 Pro. It's surprisingly affordable considering just how high quality this thing is, so if you want to take advantage of a great deal and support the channel by extension, as well as keep the Uncletopia servers online, you know, they cost a lot of money, check out redmagic by clicking the link in the description below. Thanks so much to redmagic for sponsoring this video. Observing from my spectator throne and playing the mode myself for many weeks after this, I got to fully witness and appreciate all of the creative and funny things that people try and do in order to win a round of 1,000 Uncles. The most volatile and chaotic strategy that I see attempted all the time is spawn camping. Now, if you can manage to get an engineer behind them that can set up a teleporter and a base at their spawn, you can pretty much effectively keep a good amount of them in spawn for a little while. The issue, however, starts to compound after enough of them build up inside of it, and it eventually becomes so overwhelming that the uncles breach containment.
Over here! We have no one watching the other door. Someone got out. Oh god, they're breaching!
So the spawn camp strategy only really works when there are enough players to stop them from leaving spawn, but that also leaves fewer people to destroy the sentries and kill the uncles that are guarding the objective. It's just a slippery strategy that can take a long time to set up, but only seconds to fail. It's very funny to watch. Another strategy, though, that I am considerably less approving of is backcapping, because a lot of the viable maps for this mode are attack defend maps with multiple points. People will often go spy and wait on the second point until the first point is capped so they can easily capture second before the uncles have enough time to build anything. Now, backcapping is just a part of the game and is a legitimate strategy in a normal match of TF2, but I personally just don't think that it's nearly as fun when half of the map is suddenly over before you get a chance to play it properly, because the point of 1,000 Uncles is overcoming a ridiculous number of engineer bots, and backcapping robs players of that experience. But at the time, I didn't think that there was really anything that I could do about it except to let people know that it's just not all that fun to do that. At this point in the journey, though, I was overall super satisfied with the 1,000 Uncles. I mean, there were still a handful of ideas that I had knocking around to optimize it or make it a little bit more interesting, but I had basically thought of the plugin as being pretty much finished. Up until then, it had been a side project that I had cobbled into existence out of my sheer desire to play it myself, but it had proved to be such an interesting experience that I was planning on making a video about it to let people know that, if they so choose, they can join a server and fight an infinite army of Uncle Danes. So I began collecting footage and drafting out an outline for a said video when suddenly, with no warning, something happened.
Thanks, and have fun.
Out of nowhere, Valve randomly dropped this incredible change. They increased the player limit, and boy did they increase it. They raised it from 32 to 100. It was almost as if Valve knew exactly what I had wanted from the very beginning of developing 1000 Uncles. In my mind, the amount of uncles on the red team, while ridiculously numerous already at 20, had always felt a bit smaller than I had envisioned. Immediately, the possibility for what 1000 Uncles could now be with just this one change expanded overnight. Instantly, just to see what would happen, we doubled the size of both teams, 24 human players versus 40 uncles. Why not? I was emboldened to try this because pretty much right away, it was made clear that TF2, with a generous amount of optimization plugins and server power, could actually handle up to 100 players on the same server, as crazy as that may seem. According to the testing that people had been doing with 100 players, 64 seemed to be the breaking point for significantly impacting players' client-side frame rate, and 24 versus 40 was exactly that, so it seemed to be the obvious number to try. But regardless, in our special case, hitting that newly raised limit of 100 with something like 24 versus 70 is not a great idea, even though it is technically possible, simply due to that one remaining sticking point that had been giving us grief from the very beginning: the object limit, the final boss's second phase. With the doubled numbers of players and bots, a typical match on an average size map like Badwater now hovered around 1500 objects when it was a much more manageable amount before, and on larger maps, especially Gold Rush, Hoodoo, Thunder Mountain, and Egypt, it was pretty much guaranteed that a full server would eventually just straight up crash if anyone did anything even remotely impactful. The plugin that we had relied on before to clean up objects when it was getting too dicey was pretty much just always in effect at this point, and it just could not prevent crashing from large spikes. So I asked Shunik, who had given me so much hope that this would work after seeing him get almost double the amount of people to play on his servers without crashing. I asked him, what do I do? And basically his response was this: strippers! Okay, a stripper is in fact not those guys from Magic Mike. It's actually just a server config file that can say, don't load this list of map elements. So the idea is to go through a map and strip away all of the objects that are not essential to the functionality of said map. Because there are a pretty good amount of objects that a map loads that are basically only visual, such as wires or small lights. And like a bro, Shunik literally gave me his stripper config that covers pretty much every map element that is always going to be unnecessary to load. Pretty much right away, this solved about 90% of the issues that we were having hitting the object limit. I say 90% because there were still a handful of problematic maps like Gold Rush and Thunder Mountain. These remaining sticking points needed specific stripper configs in order to work, which would have entailed going into that map file and finding specific elements that are not required for that specific map to function and adding it to that list, something that I didn't have the skill set to do myself, nor my coding teammates the patience to learn how to do effectively. Shunik didn't need specific strippers for certain maps because he had solved a lot of his object limit problems by just disabling cosmetics entirely and relying heavily on the object deleting plugin, something that I was definitely not going to resort to for 1000 Uncles. But it was around this time when I was trying to figure out who out there may have already made specific stripper configs for large maps that I suddenly had a realization that for the past year, I had never actually bothered to see if there were any other server owners out there who had recreated Nemu's Engineer Fortress. I mean, Nemu's was a relatively popular server back in the day. I honestly had been pretty stupid to assume that I was the only one who remembers and missed playing Engineer Fortress and had the resources necessary to revive it. So I just looked it up, and there it was. bangerz Engineer Fortress, apparently created a little over 1 month after Nemu's went offline. Honestly, I was kind of embarrassed. I had been building this thing from scratch through trial and error, thinking that I was resurrecting some ancient artifact of TF2 history, when it's been right here this whole time. Now, to be fair, upon further inspection, bangerz, with a Z, is about as much of a recreation of Nemu's Engineer Fortress as 1000 Uncles is, and I would say that they are both inspired by it rather than faithful recreations. And I would call bangerz an advanced Engineer Fortress server. It has hundreds of custom maps, multiple custom difficulties that players can vote for, and is populated by a regular group that I would call experts at destroying large groups of engineers as efficiently as possible. It's fair to say, though, that this is a community of some of the last remaining Engineer Fortress superfans. A good number of Nemu's alumni still play here as well, including the creator and owner of bangerz, Dane. So I reached out to him and asked him if he had any strippers for the specific group of maps that we were still crashing on. Not only did he give me pretty much every remaining stripper config I needed and then some, he has since been a great help in expanding the map pool for 1000 Uncles, because I didn't even mention this before, but since the very beginning, there was always a pretty large selection of payload and attack defend maps that simply didn't work because the Uncles just straight up refused to walk out of spawn. This is because TF bots are actually very stupid. So stupid, in fact, that they literally don't know how to walk unless there is a nav mesh telling them where to go. Remember when I talked about that one thing that one time and used nav meshes to measure the playable space of every map? Well, those actually have an intended purpose, and that is to basically map out exactly where the bots are allowed to move to, as well as give them information regarding where would be an effective place to build sentry guns, like near capture points, for example. But some maps, for whatever reason, don't provide a nav mesh by default, and I was under the impression that there was nothing that I could do about it, until Dynamelt came along and told me that no, you can easily do something about it, you idiot. You can just manually generate a nav mesh using the game's console and then upload that nav file to the server that is running the map, and it will work perfectly fine. Here, take all of the nav meshes I currently use for my servers. Awesome. A combination of adding all of the missing nav meshes and implementing both a universal stripper config from Shunic and the custom-made ones from Dynamilk expanded the available map pool from this to this. So shout out to Shunic for doing a lot of the groundwork on making the large player count servers function, and shout out to Dynamilk and bangerz for helping me with the rest of the issues, because it basically got me over the finish line to finally considering my version of Engineer Fortress feature complete and ready to launch. The links to all of their stuff is going to be in the description. Now, I want to make it clear that I am compressing the shit out of this timeline by about a year here. This mode was in a state of limbo for much more time than it was being actively worked on, because around the time that Valve had said that TF2 was going to be upgraded to 64-bit, there were leaks and whispers that not far behind that change was going to be an increase to the object limit as well. I had heard around the water cooler that it's supposed to be a pretty hefty increase as well, something like going from 2048 all the way up to 16,000, I've heard. I mean, if that's true, that would have essentially have solved all of the problems that we had with crashing overnight. So I spent basically all of this entire year waiting for this mythical object limit increase update to happen before I finalized 1000 Uncles and made a video about it. Unfortunately, it seems that this update is taking a lot longer than I would have hoped. It's almost like it's being worked on by Valve or something. And at the end of the day, it's not even really guaranteed that it's going to happen in the first place. So that's why this video is coming out now instead of much, much sooner. But maybe this extra time to let it cook had been a blessing in disguise, because in the meantime, we've done pretty much everything we can do to reduce the object count without compromising the enjoyment of players, including getting rid of building gibs and dropped weapons and ammo, yet keeping the player ragdolls enabled, because it's worth those extra few entities to see a funny ragdoll, as I'm sure you would agree. Maybe right after this video comes out, it will be just my luck that they finally increase the object limit and I will be able to finally try something crazy like 24 versus 70 or something, but we'll see. Also during this time though, I actually reached out to Jill and asked him about nemus. Yeah, I had completely forgotten up until I was talking to Dynamilk about him that I had added Jill on Steam way back in 2017 after I met him when I visited Valve. I'd barely spoken to him since, but I decided to see if he'd be willing to answer questions about Engineer Fortress and nemus, and to my honest shock, he responded. Turns out my guess that Jill not only created nemus but created the Engineer Fortress plugin himself was true. So Engineer Fortress, if you think about it, is kind of like a semi-official game mode since it was originally created by a TF2 developer. I mean, he wasn't working at Valve when he developed it, but still, I still think that counts. Jill also confirmed to me that his experience working on Engineer Fortress and other plugins that he had developed for his servers was a contributing factor to him securing his job at Valve working on TF2 itself, which I think is pretty awesome. I also asked him why nemus shut down, something that its old player base never got to know, and he told me that it was just because it waned in popularity over the years, which gave him less and less of a justification to maintain it. Now, according to the people who played on the servers when it was up, it seems like they don't really agree that it was too unpopular to maintain, but that's just what was said, and I didn't want to press the issue further. Knowing that Jill has long since moved on to work on projects other than TF2 at Valve, it wouldn't surprise me that the underlying reason for nemu's abrupt shutdown was just not being interested in maintaining a more than decade-old TF2 server when your current interests are not TF2. That being said, as could be stated about all TF2 devs, communication to the players would have been greatly appreciated. But on the bright side, waiting on Valve has made popping into 1000 Uncles very fun for me, since the servers eventually generated a pretty solid group of regulars as well as randoms who have no idea what they've stumbled into. It's been super fun to watch people play 1000 Uncles for the first time, whether it be the people who join off of the server browser out of curiosity or fellow TF2 content creators that I've shown it to on a whim.
What is happening?
I'm gonna make you guys fight 40 of me. Oh yeah, okay. We can have tellies and spawn.
Mode in a competitive format.
Yeah, I'm already brainstorming my roster.
We're doing it, lads. We're doing it.
Oh my god, there's so many! I'm out of ammo! I'm out of ammo!
My god, there's just a sea of Uncle Danes.
Dude, it never ends. It never ends. They're just always working. Go, 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 go! Clear the point to the limit!
It is now. It's now or never.
This is the push.
I got a little bit. We got a little bit.
I'm hiding on the right. No!
I got it. I got it.
It's just on the right. It's just on the right. Hide in one of the corners.
Big triangle. Oh my god. Oh my god. Stay out.
They're on the point. They're trying to defend. No.
Is this him? It's him! Thank you. Thank you. All right, now we can win. Now we can win.
Come on. Go, 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 go.
I'm on it.
Yeah.
Come on.
Ooh, I'm dead.
Supporting from the back line.
Supporting. Yeah. Oh my god.
Yes.
It's a little more. Clear the point. Clear the point. Let's go. Oh my god. This is too fun. Why is it so fun?
After this, I'm not gonna say the word uncle for like 3 days at least.
Now, one of my favorite things about 1000 Uncles, hands down, is how specific the metagame is in order to effectively part the Red Sea of Uncles. And oftentimes, there are certain weapons that see limited use in casual mode that are must-picks in 1000 Uncles. I want you guys to eventually play it and discover some of these things yourselves, but I will briefly talk about each class here and what kind of things that they can do, and what unlockable weapons they can use that are fun and effective, starting from what I think are the most powerful classes to the least powerful in 1000 Uncles. We start, of course, with the Demo Man. Being the engineer's hard counter, it's no shock to know that the secret to beating this mode quickly is to have like 4 or 5 Demo Men on your team, but it's not all about spamming pipes because the Uncles can pretty easily out-heal direct pipes hitting their sentries, so it's actually just all about sticky bombs. And since sticky spam is largely ineffective, the Scottish resistance is pretty much a straight upgrade here. In general though, this mode is pretty good practice for getting your angles down on Demo Man, which is bad news for me when I play regular TF2.
We need to all put stickies down and then count to 3 and then right click.
The second most powerful class in 1000 Uncles is, believe it or not, the Engineer. Well, maybe it's not that surprising if you play a lot of MVM where it's practically required to have an engineer just for the dispenser, but in the case of 1000 Uncles, it's not much different. Dispensers and teleporters are essential to maintaining a foothold on the front lines, especially with just how much ammo your team expends, sometimes to the point where in order to be able to push a point, a dispenser needs to be literally up a pair of heavies' butts. But your own sentry gun is also one of the best ways to prevent Uncles from retaking an area after their hold goes down. Oftentimes you will be the sole player holding back the masses as your team is able to push the objective. The Wrangler is also very good at clearing out nests at a distance. 2 Wranglers is basically a guaranteed way to clear out an area, in fact, but unfortunately if you're a shotgun lover like me, there is practically no use for it in this mode, so the Rescue Ranger is pretty much the only thing worth using. Soldier is next, and you'd think it's because he has the direct hit, but actually I think the DH is a bit of a noob trap in this mode because, well, the Uncles can just out-heal it with their super fast wrenches. In reality though, splash damage is king. The Uncles tend to all build in the same kind of areas, so you can get a lot of mileage from just spamming a clip of rockets in their general direction and knocking them out of their turtling positions. I'd say that pretty much every primary unlock the Soldier has access to is either fun or effective, even the Cow Mangler, which you'd think would be useless against so many buildings, but that charge shot can actually come in pretty clutch, surprisingly. But the real power that the Soldier has, in my opinion, are his banners, which he can't charge over the buildings, but there are so many Uncles running around that it's not hard to get it charged anyway. And as a result, you can have a constant rotation of 3 or 4 soldiers just blowing their battalions in buff banners, and it's incredibly useful for pushing in. Spy's up next, and despite him being the only class that can easily approach the Uncles and kill them without getting demolished, he's only 4th on this list because he's still, at the core of it, a single target class that is being pitted up against 40 enemies all at once.
You know, if you want to play Spy, your Eternal Reward might actually be good here.
Unsurprisingly, your Eternal Reward is literally the only knife you can use, since undisguising near a dozen sentry guns is a pretty bad idea.
Oh no! One stab miss and it's over.
But in general, Spy is the most effective when he stays away from the large groups and focuses on taking out smaller outcroppings that are giving the team trouble due to a weird angle. Against 4 or 5 of them in an isolated area, Spy is very good, but against a horde of a dozen or more of them, not so much. They will bump into you, they will notice you stabbing them, and they will all open fire on you at the same time. Medic. Normally, the most powerful class in vanilla TF2 simply because of the ability to uber charge, but on a map full of sentry guns that have so much knockback that you get flung into space upon approach, it's not nearly as overpowered here.
Oh, I'm not going to survive the end of this Uber.
Oh my god!
Instead, the medic just being able to wipe away the damage that your teammates take from peeking around the corner for half a second makes him super valuable to have around. Kritzkrieg can be good with a Demo Man stickies to guarantee the kill on a large nest for sure, but the sleeper MVP of Medic's kit by far in this mode is the Amputator, a weapon that sees practically no play in vanilla TF2, but here outputs such an absurd amount of healing that you can easily farm assists by just sitting there spamming the taunt button. Heavy is pretty good, although he gets caught out by peeking nests that he can't possibly outdamage, so the Brass Beast is generally his best primary here in my opinion. He's not nearly as adept at clearing out existing nests as the Demo Man or even Spy, but what Heavy really excels at is basically being the bouncer, putting his hand on the uncle's chests as they run in trying to build a new sentry gun. Resetup prevention is something that the Engineer also excels at, but the Heavy is able to do it pretty much instantly while the Engineer has to move his gear up and wait for it to redeploy. So that makes Heavy a really good pre-NG Uncle suppressor while the NGs move in so they can hold it down permanently. Alright, Pyro, to nobody's surprise, is kind of near the bottom, mostly because even with an Uber charge, only 1 or 2 sentry guns can completely stuff them. Now, in specific instances where there are no sentry guns built somehow, a Flog Uber can sometimes go absolutely insane, but pretty much any power class can excel in that situation. I've seen some people use the Dragon's Fury, though, to middling success, since it can penetrate buildings and kill the uncles that are hiding behind the wall of sentries. But I think the sleeper pick here is the Scorch Shot, which doesn't really get kills as much as it just completely disrupts the shit out of the TF bot AI. Not only does it knock them around like a pinball, but when a bot is on fire, they are coded to sometimes try and find a health source. If there are no dispensers nearby, that means that it'll leave its sentry gun for a while to recover, leaving your team open to take out the gun. This is one of the most effective ways to unchain an uncle from their turtle mode lifestyle, and in my opinion, it's super underrated, even though from a fragging perspective, it is kind of underwhelming and it's not really that much fun as other classes can be. Sniper is only second to last on this list because it's entirely dependent on the map. Some maps allow for him to set up and just snipe away, ideally with the Bizarre Bargain or the Hitman's Heatmaker, but a lot of the time, killing a single uncle every few seconds when he's just going to come back by the time you take care of the buildings he left behind is not super effective. However, I will say that it is still pretty fun. Here's a clip where Spy body blocked a bunch of them inside of spawn, allowing me to get a crazy Machina collateral on them. Also, the Huntsman is surprisingly effective. Scout is here. Yeah, Scout is definitely a class that you have the option of selecting if you want to. But yeah, Scout is dead last on this list because honestly, he's kind of useless in this mode. I mean, if you think about it, they had to give Scout an entirely new class role of Money Getter in MVM for him to be worth picking in that mode. But that is not the case here. Bunk is something I've seen a lot of people try, but it's sometimes hard to tell exactly how useful something like that actually is.
I can't even tell if bonking helps in any way, but it takes less
Can
brain
you like
cells.
bonk and
You've dedicated yourself to this bonk theory for longer than anyone I've ever seen.
After a year and a half of working on this side project on and off, we finally were able to slap the 1.0 sticker on it and updated it to the version that you'll be able to play right now, but only after I'm making a few more final changes to optimize the balancing. The main ones to mention here are that they don't build teleporters anymore, since they hardly ever used them, they often got stuck on them, and they contributed to the overall object count for basically no value at all. We also figured out how to get rid of Spy back capping because, well, back capping is just no fun. It just goes against the spirit of 1000 Uncles, so you can't cap a Spy for 20 seconds after another point has been capped. Sorry, not sorry. Oh, and I've been experimenting with trying Halloween maps out lately. The ones that stand out so far as being actually pretty fun are Ioduct and Ghost Fort. These maps, however, are often a complete toss-up between the Uncles getting trapped in spawn after the truce allows Blue to easily set up a spawn camp, or the entire Blue team getting completely rolled by Marasmus.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, and just so you guys know, by the way, strange weapons don't count kills against bots. So no, this is not a strange weapon farming server. However, strange cosmetics and some weapons do count points or times used or whatever. It basically works how it would work in Man vs. Machine. Also, you can get achievements for playing on this server, and if you are a stickler for keeping your in-game stats realistic, then you should stay far, far away from 1000 Uncles. I personally don't really care, but I thought I'd mention it since some people do. Also, I feel like people have probably been thinking about this the entire video, but as the original Uncle Dane, I can join the red team whenever I want. In fact, Moonly made it so I am the only person who is allowed to do this, as the command is tied to my Steam ID. And yes, I have used this ability for evil.
It's taking a while because we need more people on the right side.
Wait.
Oh, you fuck! God damn it!
There's a player in the red team. What?
Yeah, it's 5 golden.
Everyone get back into blue spawn. There's a...
Where is he?
Escape! Why can't we escape?
You can play 1000 Uncles right now. We expanded the server count in both regions to try and accommodate for the large influx of players after this video, but I highly recommend that you check it out if you're looking for a good time in TF2 outside of casual mode. And if you find yourself playing on Uncletopia a lot, I would encourage you to consider subscribing to the Patreon, because the servers, well, they cost a lot of money out of pocket to run, and I appreciate all the help I can get, since I don't really plan on ever polluting my servers with annoying in-game donator perks or advertisements. So if you want to ensure Uncletopia stays up, the best thing that you can do is subscribe to the Patreon to support the servers directly. But yeah, that's it. I just wanted to say thanks for watching my video, first of all. Thank you for enduring the chaos and the madness and listening to my rambling. There are still so many things that I never touched on in this video, like King of the Hill. That's a whole thing. That's like an entire other subject. But once that object limit update drops, 1000 Uncles may be expanded even further, to the point where a part 2 of this thing may be in order. So we'll see. But yeah, I appreciate you guys. Thanks for watching, and I will talk to you nieces and nephews next time. Bye-bye.